There is no shortage of headlines coming out of D.C., from the Capitol to the Supreme Court, and all against the backdrop of a country bracing for competitive midterm elections. Congressman Mike Levin is joining us in studio today to give us some perspective and go beyond the headlines. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Joey. Good to be with you.
So kind of like drinking out of a fire hose lately. What is consuming your attention? And you just got back to town.
Yeah, I just got back to town, and the last 2 weeks have been complete chaos and dysfunction. Republicans obviously control the House, the Senate, the White House, and yet I think due to the weakness of Speaker Johnson and the inconsistency of President Trump in terms of what he wants, what his priorities are, and what he's willing to do, we haven't really been able to get much done.
I mean, you were supposed to be joining us remotely from D.C. today.
Yep.
You're here now. What does that tell us?
Well, we've got major things that are pending in the House of Representatives. The FISA authority for surveillance, that has expired for our intelligence community. The National Defense Authorization Act is hanging in the balance, as are the energy and water appropriations bills, the national security and State Department appropriations bills. These are serious bills that need to be advanced. Hopefully we can get to some form of bipartisanship on them, but these are major, major bills. And, in order to get them done, Mike Johnson's tried to move rules. That's the procedural move that you need.
Explain what that means to
so
us.
to pass a bill, you can either get 2/3 of the members present and voting, that's suspending the rules, or you can go through the Rules Committee, in which case you can get a bill done on a simple majority. That's typically how you would do it with a simple majority vote. A lot of things don't get 2/3. And that requires, though, for a party to stick together. Nancy Pelosi, in all her years as Speaker, never lost a single rule vote. And this past week was the 9th that Mike Johnson has lost, meaning his own Republican members are not willing to go along with what the Republican leadership wants, and they're not willing to do what Donald Trump tells them to do by Truth Social post. So that leads to incredible chaos. This Congress has been the least productive Congress in the modern history of the United States. It's incredibly frustrating, and November can't come here soon enough for me, Joey.
So those important bills that you just mentioned, are they just languishing right now? If you were in D.C., would you be voting on them?
Hard to say. I think it would be better to be in D.C., at least trying to advocate for some sort of action and to get to any sort of bipartisan consensus. I can tell you the other thing that happened is on Monday, the president, or last week, the president was supposed to sign a housing bill, a major bill that we'd worked on for a number of years. I had specific provisions in there, one that would finally define veterans' disability not as income for purposes of the VA supportive housing program. We were thrilled to codify that provision, which had prevented many veterans from getting the housing assistance that they've needed. And the president refused to sign it. They had
a bipartisan bill, we should mention.
An overwhelming bipartisan vote in the House and the Senate, and it was sitting for the president, waiting to be signed. They had the podium ready, they had the gathering all ready to assemble, and literally in the middle of the press conference, Joey, the president said, "I'm not going for it because you're not sending me the Save America Act." Now, it's important for people to know what that bill is, because I think it's being mischaracterized as a voter ID bill. This bill the president wants is far more, and it's far more troubling than that. What it would require is that you have an original birth certificate or a passport, and that your name on one of those two documents has to match your ID in order to be able to vote. Now, if you don't have a passport and you don't have an original birth certificate, there are millions and millions of Americans who don't have either, and there are still many married women who've changed their name, so their name on their original birth certificate doesn't match the name on their driver's license. This will create a giant mess. And I think we just want for people who are legally eligible to vote to be able to do so, and the other side clearly does not.
So he called that bipartisan housing bill a, quote, yawn.
Yeah.
He said the SAVE Act is more important. Is he withholding his signature as leverage? Is he using this housing bill as leverage, as a negotiating point?
Well, he can try, but the way that it works, what's called a pocket veto. So we sent the bill. Mike Johnson, to his credit, did send the bill to the president's desk, and if the president fails to either sign or veto it, within 10 days it will become law. If the president vetoes it, I think we have enough votes in the House and Senate to override the veto. That requires 2/3 in both chambers. So I think this bill is going to become law. and Donald Trump can't take the win. This is a clearly important issue to so many millions of Americans who are having a tough time being able to afford a place to live. And this bill had really important provisions. I mentioned the vets provision that I'd been working on, but it would crack down on private equity firms who are buying up single-family neighborhoods, as an example, and it would eliminate some of the red tape that so many are facing in building homes. It's inconceivable that he wouldn't sign this bill.
You're saying this legislation could be part of his legacy, so why don't you think he wants to sign it?
Couldn't tell you, Joey. I think he either doesn't fully appreciate or understand how the legislative process works, doesn't seem to be particularly engaged in the inner workings of the Congress, certainly has not extended an olive branch to any Democratic members of Congress, which is disappointing. When he was president before, we were able to work with him and we were able to work with his administration, and he was surrounded by at least some people who had administrative memory and were willing to work across the aisle. This time he's not. This time you have people who are just completely unwilling or unable to work across the aisle in any kind of good faith.
If he does ultimately refuse to sign, does that tell you that he doesn't see Congress as a co-equal branch?
I don't think he's ever seen Congress as a co-equal branch. I think he's, particularly in the second term, done everything possible to try to minimize the role of the House and the Senate. And unfortunately, Joey, a lot of my Republican colleagues are all too willing to go along for the ride rather than stand up for our institution, for the Congress. And, Madison and others in the Federalist Papers, they were very clear that they believed that the ambition of the leaders of the House and Senate would be a natural check on the ambition of the president. But what we're seeing today is Mike Johnson, to a lesser extent John Thune, I give Thune more credit than I give Johnson, we're just seeing him roll over and play dead in most instances, with very, very few exceptions. And that's really hard to watch, because you would like to believe that, particularly for those Republicans who've been around before Trump, presumably will be there after Trump, that they would stand for something rather than just go along with the MAGA agenda.
So the SAVE Act is stalled in Congress right now. Do you think we've reached the end of the road there?
It doesn't have the votes in the Senate. Whether it could pass in the House or not, I have no idea. They're trying to find a legislative vehicle to attach the SAVE Act. That's one of the reasons they sent us home early the last 2 weeks, is they can't agree on what that vehicle should be. At the same time, there are other big priorities out there that need acted upon. And we're in this holding pattern in the meantime, and that's good for nobody.
Let's pivot to the Supreme Court for a minute. We'll come back to the Capitol in a bit. But we've had some major decisions this week, including upholding birthright citizenship. What message does that send to this administration?
So the birthright citizenship case, I'm obviously happy that 5 justices decided to, that the Constitution still matters, and the 14th Amendment still requires that if you are born in this country, that you are a citizen. But I think about people like my mom. My mom is 82 years old, and both of her parents, my grandparents, were born in Mexico. And my grandpa was, born there, and he came when he was 15 years old. My grandma came when she was a baby into the United States. And they had 4 daughters, including my mom. My mom was one of those born here. 2 were born in Mexico. And does that make my mom any less of an American? This is the only country she's ever known. I think at 82 years old, she shouldn't have to worry. She shouldn't have to look over her shoulder that she's somehow less of an American. It was a preposterous decision from the beginning. And now you have Stephen Miller and the rest of them saying some truly onerous, awful things, Joey. Fundamentally, what has made America great to begin with, at least in our lifetimes, I think, is that you can come from anywhere in the world, you can work hard, pay taxes, play by the rules, and you can make it in the United States of America. That's what my grandparents did. That's what so many families out there have done. And so, look, I think it's the least we could expect or hope for, that the Supreme Court would just acknowledge that the Constitution says what it says. This isn't that complicated.
News of the day, let's talk about trade. The president has decided not to renew USMCA, which we sort of suspected was coming, right? What happens now?
It's a deal that he was very excited about, if you recall. It wasn't that long ago that we were negotiating USMCA, a little over 5 years ago. And Trump said it was much better than NAFTA, much different than NAFTA. It really wasn't all that different than NAFTA, but of course it was Donald Trump's deal. So Trump obviously took a huge victory lap at the time. It's interesting to see him want to blow up his own deal. But look, the same things that were true then are true now. We need labor and environmental safeguards. I want to see any new negotiation with Mexico in particular address the ongoing pollution challenges at the Tijuana River Valley. And so I'll be eager to be involved in negotiations just as I was 5 and 6 years ago when we got $300 million from that package to go towards the expansion of the South Bay wastewater treatment plant. Some of that money finally being deployed to get necessary relief for folks in the South Bay.
Do you think an enduring peace deal with Iran is in the cards?
You know, I was on the call a couple days ago with Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, and it was the first briefing that we'd received as members of Congress in, I don't know, 2 months. And I can tell you it was one of the most unimpressive and uninformative calls that I've ever participated in as a member of Congress. Because we really learned nothing that we couldn't have read in the newspaper. But what was so alarming to me is for all of Donald Trump's boasting that he was going to destroy the JCPOA, the Obama-era anti-nuclear deal, this memorandum of understanding that Trump has now signed and the 60-day clock is ongoing, is worse, categorically worse, by almost every measure than that deal that Trump decided to scrap. We have very little visibility, no visibility really, on the Iranian nuclear program, on their enrichment activities. We've provided tens of billions of dollars with a promise for up to $300 billion more for the Iranian regime. We now have a younger person in charge of the Iranian regime whose father was killed. So the whole thing is a mess, and I think it goes back to February 28th when Epic Fury was started, when members of Congress were not consulted, we were not read in, we had no opportunity to provide feedback or comment, we were not really briefed in an adequate fashion after the fact. There was no case made to the Congress, there was no war powers resolution at the time, there was no explanation provided about an exit strategy, and so we then realized over many months here that there wasn't really a great strategy going in. There wasn't really a well thought out explanation still to this day of what the clear objectives are or what the exit plan would be. And it's the old adage that failing to plan is planning to fail. And unfortunately what we're seeing right now is Iran able to leverage the Strait of Hormuz to have enormous economic pressure on the rest of the world, including here in the United States. We've seen gasoline go way up as a result of this. And, you had both the House and the Senate finally, over 60 days later, exercise its war powers consistent with the Constitution and voted in both the House and the Senate that we were against this unauthorized war.
When you think about the list of goals that the administration presented when this conflict began, do you think any of those were noble and have been accomplished? None
of them have been accomplished. I think the one thing that obviously did happen is Khamenei was killed. His son now took over, much younger, I'm sure, just as radical. Some of the reporting is that maybe even more radical. But in terms of the ballistic missile capability, in terms of the nuclear capability, in terms of the IRGC's influence or impact, all of it is worse, arguably, than it was when all this started. I think, threats around the region remain a very significant challenge for the United States and for the free world. And the attack, the unilateral attack without the consent or knowledge of Congress and without the buy-in of the American people has made, back in February, at the end of February, has made things materially worse than they would have been.
How confident are you that Democrats are going to win back the House in November?
So I'm always cautiously optimistic. We have a lot of work to do all around the country, and it's been made more difficult by a couple of Supreme Court decisions, candidly. One was the Calais decision on the Voting Rights Act that allowed for 3 southern districts to be gerrymandered in a way that took away 3 southern seats that were held by Democrats. Now they're overwhelmingly Republican seats. And then the other was this campaign finance decision, which now has allowed for the direct coordination of candidates with national campaign committees. The reason why that one's important is it's going to allow a huge amount of big, dark money to be flowing in, and the minimum advertised rate for ads that, it used to be only candidates could get that lowest advertised price for TV time. Now those big PACs are going to be able to get that same rate, we believe. That's being litigated separately. There's actually a lawsuit ongoing to try to prevent that. But if that's allowed, what you're going to see is, the advantage will be to those who get the billionaires and the biggest corporations on their side. And obviously the advantage for that doesn't go towards the Democratic Party. But all that notwithstanding, Joey, we have amazing candidates running all across the country, including here in California. And I feel confident that if we run our race and we get out there and we talk about, I say the 3 C's, costs, care, and corruption, affordability and accountability, I think we're going to have a great night in November.
Speaking of corruption, you're working with AOC on the End Corruption Caucus, the goal to restore public trust in government. Is that a lost cause? And how do you accomplish that?
It can never be a lost cause. So what I see every morning when I wake up, the stories that I read about, the business deals that I read about that the Trump family is engaging in, the Qatari jet, which is now the new Air Force One, every single one of these, you can unpack it and you can say that any one of them would arguably be the end of any other administration. It's that bad. The $1.6 billion mining deal in Kazakhstan, which we know will benefit the Trump family. The $620 million Vulcan Elements deal for rare earth minerals that will benefit the Trump family. Any of the meme coin deals or the countless others that have gone straight in the president's pocket. And enough is enough. At some point, enough is enough. So what we've done with the creation of this End Corruption Caucus, myself and Jason Crow from Colorado and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York, representing different parts of our big Democratic tent within the House Democratic Caucus, we've said, look, we have to have a couple main principles here. Number one is we've got to get the dark money out of our politics. We've got to do all we can to shun corporate PAC money. Number two, we have to ban members of Congress from trading stock. Members of Congress should never be using material non-public information that they get in virtue of our jobs to line our own pockets. And we have a lot more legislation, a lot more ideas ahead.
None of that has happened yet.
Correct.
What makes you think you all can bring that to fruition?
Well, we're just going to keep at it. We have to try. Just because Mike Johnson hasn't wanted to bring any of these ideas to the floor for a vote, I can tell you that if a stock trading ban were actually allowed to go to the floor tomorrow, of course we're here in San Diego rather than in Washington, D.C., but hypothetically, if you brought that to the floor for a vote, it would pass. I think enough members of Congress realize that it is beyond a bad look. It is just fundamentally corrupt to be enriching themselves off of non-public information.
How do you balance this emphasis on accountability, these lofty goals, with legislating on the pocketbook issues, on affordability, on the things that really impact your constituents?
You got to walk and chew gum at the same time. So, for me, I can't look the other way when I see something that is, fundamentally, morally, and ethically wrong. I have to stand up and speak out. I think that my grandparents, if they were still here, I know my parents, they expect that their member of Congress, and I am their member of Congress, that I would stand up and speak out against things I know to be wrong, while at the same time doing everything I can to represent our district and our region. I'm really proud of a lot of what we've been able to accomplish. The federal investment, over $1 billion for our infrastructure coming back to our district, and the legislative effectiveness too, which I give all credit to my great legislative team, but consistently in the top 5% most effective in the House for the quality and the quantity of our legislation. So we're going to keep at it. Despite it all, Joey, I still try to be as bipartisan as I can. I can tell you it's really tough these days because you have to have willing partners across the aisle who are willing to look beyond just what the president wants, which I think is always a fight with the Democratic Party. We've got to find common ground. That's what American democracy is supposed to be all about.
Has the party landed on a cohesive economic message going into these midterms?
Well, Leader Jeffries, I think soon to be Speaker Jeffries, what he has done is he's tasked 5 different working groups, and I lead one of them. I co-lead one with my good friend Nikki Budzinski from Illinois. We're all focusing on gas and utility prices, of course, which are far too high, and how we deal with energy affordability. There are others for health care and child care and housing and groceries. So we're going to be not just talking about reflexively what we don't like about the Trump administration with the war and the tariffs and the rest, but also what plans we have as part of an affirmative agenda moving forward. So stay tuned for a lot more of that.
We have hit a lot of bullet notes during this interview, right? Very comprehensive. There's a lot going on. What is keeping you up at night?
Honestly, I think the corruption that I see, because at the end of the day, if you normalize corruption in the United States of America.
Is that what you see happening?
I do. I mean, I think a obvious example, J.D. Vance was being interviewed at the Nixon Library the other day, and he said that if Watergate were happening today, that it would be a 12-hour news story. And I think why he says that is to try to create a permission structure for the unbelievably corrupt things that we see happening day in and day out from this administration. And if you flood the zone, as Steve Bannon said, enough, then people will be so overwhelmed and so desensitized to the corruption that people are allowed to get away with it. And that's what I see happening right now. I see, just take the Qatari jet, for example. Can you imagine for a second if Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, or for that matter, any past Republican president, if they were to have accepted a $400 million jet from a foreign government, then charge the American taxpayer at minimum another $400 million to make that jet secure, to install that equipment. We've heard it's actually more like $1 billion. And then have it so that as soon as that president's out of office, that jet will be transferred to that president, to the president's personal library foundation. I think that would be the outrage. That would be literally on the front page. It's sort of a trite expression now, but it should be front page news. But, you know, for President Trump, it's just another day in the week. We're all supposed to turn our head and act like it isn't important. It is important. The fact that he's making billions of dollars, you know, his sons are investing in firms that are getting $620 million, the Defense Department loan, one of the biggest loans in the history of the Defense Department, to a company whose one of the investors is Trump Jr. Another $1.6 billion mining deal for tungsten, where Trump himself was on the phone with the Kazakh government pushing this deal. And Howard Lutnick's own kids made money in the deal too, as part of Cantor Fitzgerald. So any one of these things, Joey, would be front page news every day. And now it's just another day of the week. We cannot normalize it. We cannot allow this country, which, you know, it's the best country, 250 years of being a beacon of freedom and hope and opportunity. And think of all the great presidents that we've had, Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, all the people who have fought and died for this country. And we're going to allow this corruption with, and where does it end? Where's the bottom of this? So, you know, despite the fact that, you know, we are at this point, I believe the American people are way better than this. I think we're gonna, you know, we're sick and tired of it. And I think most people that I speak to, regardless of their party. Now, there are some that no matter what Trump does, they just think, you know, anybody that's anti-Trump or says anything against Trump, that it's all fake news. They also think he won the 2020 election, the big lie. But Trump has, you know, embraced this belief that if you just lie enough, that nothing matters anymore. And I won't stand for it.
We will leave it on that note. Thank you so much for being here with us today, straight from the airport.
Thanks, Joey.